Hello everyone, I'm here on the high deserts of Eastern Idaho, in the middle of the Idaho National Laboratory, which is most known for its development of nuclear reactor technologies since the 1940s. And behind me is the world's first nuclear power plant. So today what I want to do is explore the atomic history of Eastern Idaho. I hope you'll join me. So in 1949, the Atomic Energy Commission needed a new place where they could test nuclear reactor technology. The Navy was also heavily interested in nuclear technology as a means of powering their ships and submarines. And so they settled on about 900 square miles out here in Eastern Idaho that the Navy had used as an ordnance testing range during the Second World War. They built this reactor station here. And this looks like it's the old guardhouse. I love the sign, official business only. That's an exclamation point. This facility isn't activated. Just take a peek inside this sort of guardhouse. Lots of mouse droppings. But in 1951, this nuclear power station, or this nuclear reactor, powered 4 light bulbs, proving that the technology could be used to generate power. Now I think the light bulbs were only 100 watt, and after that they continued to test reactor technology here, and I think it was closed down right in the middle of the 1960s, and it became a National Historic Site dedicated by President Johnson in 1966. So today you can visit this during the summer months and actually go inside and learn more about how this reactor operated, its importance to America's atomic history, and it should be pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's closed for the season, so I'm going to have to come back perhaps next summer and take a tour. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of the Idaho National Laboratory, which is just a massive site still home to nuclear test reactors. It's not just the Navy that operates out here, but other people, other companies can experiment with nuclear reactor technology as well. And these over here, they have a very interesting history. We'll go talk about it. Now, of course, developing nuclear technology was not without its risks. And in 1961, there was an accident out here that cost the lives of 3 men just down the road that we'll visit here in a minute. But first, I want to show you reactors that were developed to power aircraft. Early in the 50s, there was this idea of developing a nuclear-powered bomber. Now, if you can believe it, these were test beds for powering aircraft with nuclear reactors. This one over here is the earliest one. This is, I think, the heat exchanger, heat transfer 1 and 2. And then over here, this is heat exchanger 3. This one still has some of the engines, the jet engines here. So the reactor pushed heat up and through these conduits and then down in the engine. And if we come around this side, we can see here's the 2 engines. And this would have powered a nuclear bomber. Now, they started this project in the 1950s. There were a good number of people who said this is rather silly. It's a real hazard to power a bomber with nuclear technology that could crash and irradiate, parts of the globe, populated areas, things like that. And it was a project that carried on through the 1950s. I mean, you can see how far it progressed as these machines proved that it's possible. And they even developed plans for the bomb, a hangar out here. This machine, it proved the viability of nuclear power for an aircraft, and then they tested it on various materials. So this had practical applications beyond simple nuclear powered flight. But in this shed here, they offer a little more information. The nuclear powered bomber that never flew. Here's some of the men that worked on it. This is from the one we just saw just a moment ago. And it was President Kennedy that canceled the project on March 28, 1961. This gives you an idea of how it was meant to work. Heat transfer experiment number 2. Heat transfer experiment number 3. Experiment. This is a mock-up of the bomber. The engines without the reactor. The hangar they built for the bomber. And this bomber was designed to fly 120 hours on a mission, and the crew would have been a 5-man crew, and they had planned meals for the 5-man crew. And here's an example of the meals. So let's see, pork steak for lunch, beef pot roast for dinner. I mean, pretty decent meals there. Here's a picture of that engine that was used to haul the plane out that never existed. And Operation Wiener Roast demonstrated that the bomber's nuclear engines would not explode in a crash. In flight, the plane could have been a high-speed radiation hazard, and flight plans were designed to avoid inhabited areas. Here's another mock-up. Now this plane here, this is like that Boeing, what is it, the Strato cruiser? That actually was used in commercial aviation. This one also looks like the Boeing Strato cruiser, if I'm remembering that correctly. But we've got the General Electric gas generator. Considering area affected by temperature. Air cycle reactor, so I guess they're presumably using cold air at high altitudes to help cool the reactor. I don't know. That one's very space age. Then a nuclear powered ship. Now, interestingly, this is essentially a radiation exposure meter, because this machine dealt with radiation, and the government has an interest in monitoring sort of residual radiation here. And this here is a locomotive engine that's lead shielded, that was designed to haul the nuclear bomber out from its hangar for testing. Of course, because the whole project was scrapped, this was never used. Now, this nuclear bomber project lasted 10 years and cost $1 billion. Aviation pioneer Jimmy Doolittle asked President Eisenhower to scrap this project. Jimmy Doolittle was famous for commanding the 8th Air Force during World War II and had a relationship with Eisenhower as a result of that. He's also famous for the Doolittle raid on Tokyo in April 1942. But it wasn't until President Kennedy took office that the project was finally scrapped. Now I'm in Arco, Idaho, where on July 17th, 1955, this entire town was powered by atomic power for the very first time. One of the atomic testing reactors out at the site, a borax-2 reactor, powered the town here for about an hour. This was designed to show the world that atomic power could be used for peaceful purposes. This was part of the United States program of Atoms for Peace. So just down the road here in Arco is this little science museum. Well, it's called the MegaPiece Museum. It's locked up right now. They have a few interesting things here. Starting first with this torpedo. It says here this is MK-14, I guess a Mark 14 torpedo, 20.5 feet long, 21 inches in diameter. Steam turbine propulsion. Mark 14 torpedo was introduced to the Navy in 1929. Next 50 years, this class underwent 6 modifications and upgraded warheads. It was taken out of service in 1959 and reinstated in 1969. In the late 1970s, it was withdrawn from service. During World War II, the U.S. Navy submarines sank more shipping tonnage with the Mark 14 torpedo than all other sources combined. It's really cool. Here we have an example of the Mark 14. But what is perhaps even cooler is this submarine tower from the USS Hawkbill. This is called the Devil Tower, but for some people, for the obvious reason, is the number is 666. This was a nuclear submarine, hence its connection to this area with the Navy's development of nuclear reactor technology for use in ships and submarines. And over here in this little gazebo, we've got more information, like the USS Hawkbill. They had one during World War II. There's a Disney connection here. This was a cartoon that Walt Disney drew for the Hawkbill submarine that was in operation during World War II. And then in 1966, the new one was built, nuclear powered, and it lasted into 2000. And it even did an Arctic expedition in the 1980s, going under the ice. So, I've seen submarines in harbors on the coasts, but I've never really been up close to one. And this thing alone is really big. So I don't know if there's a decommissioned nuclear submarine that one can go on these days, but if there is, maybe one of these days I'd like to go. Have a tour inside. Let's see, what's the plaque here say? Sturgeon variant. 2 steam turbines, single propeller. 12 officers, 95 enlisted men. Commissioned February 1971. So yeah. And this little park here is right on the road heading into town if you're heading east to west. And over here I've heard that Pickles Place is a good joint to eat at. Down this road the United States Army built their stationary low-power reactor number 1. The purpose of this reactor was to test the ability of a small, semi-portable reactor that they could take up into the Arctic and use it to power their outposts and radar stations that were keeping watch for Russian missiles and bombers. The reactor was built just about 3/4 of a mile down the road, and it was here in 1961 where America's worst nuclear disaster with immediate deaths happened. Now, this was not a nuclear explosion. What happened was one of the men was standing on top of the reactor lifting a control rod. Now, he only had to lift this control rod 2 inches to get the job that they were trying to do done. But the control rod was stuck, and so what he instead did was yank on it and lift the rod up about 20 inches. This sent the reactor into supercriticality, as I understand it, and it caused the water coolant to instantly become steam, creating a steam hammer, which then exploded the reactor. One of the men was pinned to the ceiling with one of the steel pins that was part of the reactor. The other one was killed instantly from debris from the reactor, and the third one was wounded with debris from the reactor and fell to the floor. Alarm signals went off at the fire station down the highway here, and they traveled up here and down to the reactor. They arrived at the reactor, they didn't see anybody around, and discovered that they were dead. Now, they knew that radiation was a real problem here. They did find the third man laying on the ground. He was still alive. They took him out, put him in an ambulance, and that ambulance came down the road here. And as it got right to about this point, it was met by a doctor who was responding to the emergency. The doctor went in the ambulance, declared the man dead, and that ambulance was then taken somewhere out here in the sagebrush and abandoned, as the radioactivity emanating from that man's body was far too dangerous. It took days for the other 2 men's bodies to be recovered. Then they were taken to a storage facility, as I understand it, down this way at the central facility, where a doctor from Los Alamos was flown in, and they did a very grisly autopsy in which they had to remove body parts to be buried out here as part of nuclear waste. The reactor was demolished and buried here on site. In the years since the accident, there's been a consistent sort of conspiracy theory that this was not truly an accident, but was rather a murder-suicide as a result of a love triangle that was going on between 2 of the men and one of their wives. Now, there is some circumstantial evidence to support this theory, but I think in reality the main reason is what the AEC found in their report, that the control rod was sticking. It had a history of sticking problems. In an effort to unstick that rod, the man pulled up too much on the rod, thus causing supercriticality to occur. Well, here we are in Atomic City, Idaho, right on the edge of the Idaho National Laboratory. Now, back when INL was a newer site, there were quite a few more people here in the town and way more who visited. Here's a relic of that time. You can see it's the Twin Buttes Bar and Cafe. You can see they got that old 7-Up sign there. It's quite neat. Looks like it's just been used for storage. No idea how long it's closed, but in some ways it reminds me of some of the old stuff along Route 66. This is Main Street here in Atomic City. Some looks like an apartment block of a kind. Here we've got the Atomic City Bar. You had mushroom cloud there on the sign. It's kind of faded. Really nice bar sign. The rest of Main Street. And down here was a grocery store. They used to sell gas, as I understand it, but they don't anymore for environmental reasons and updates on gas tank policy. But this is your Main Street in Atomic City. And there's a little park here too. The John Visa Park. So we've got an old cafe or tavern here, pretty close to Atomic City. See the old bar, nice old wood paneling there. Over here we've got some food coolers. So it might have been a little cafe area or something. Just an absolute shambles. Over here in this corner we've got wood burning stove. You can see advertisements. It's got a beer advert for what? Is that Robinson beer? It's like a Mountie. So over here we've got Miller Lite. They're just oh, that's Schlitz beer. Actually, it says Schlitz. Schlitz makes it great. That's cool. That certainly dates the cafe or tavern.